What's up, y'all? I just wanted to make a little video in defense of the anti-lockdown, anti-government COVID people. There's a lot to say on it. For some reason, we like to think that, you know, everyone that doesn't want all of this government oversight is just a bad person, or they're selfish and they don't care. But there's a very one-sided discussion on COVID, and there's like one deemed intellectual and correct position, and that is you should just submit to the government everything they're saying. Look, I'm not arguing about masks necessarily. You can wear a mask, it's really not going to affect you. If the science says it prevents the spread and saves lives, wear your mask. But here in Kentucky, for instance, Governor Beshear, he shut down businesses and had a lockdown way before they ever enforced masks. Okay, so it started with a lockdown, which is a very reasonable thing to get scared of, the government shutting down your business. They did that before the mask, which one would think that is the first step. Okay, everyone wear a mask, we'll see how that goes. If things get too bad, we shut it down. They didn't do that. They're going in reverse. And so when you've got the government coming in shutting everybody's business down, you have to realize that a lot of people are going to get mad about that. It is very scary to hand your livelihood over to someone else, forfeit it all. You know, you think it's not an essential business. It's an essential business to them. And there is going to be this poverty that hits us all. And I hope that the death and the tragedy and the awful things that happen aren't comparable to the 200,000 dead to COVID. But we don't totally know. There's a lot to it. In the lockdown laws, we saw spikes in domestic abuse. We saw spikes in suicide. I'm sure there's terrible mental health effects. We're seeing that everywhere in colleges, and just a lot of people were social people, and it's not good for them. I mean, the will to live is certainly a thing, and if you have nowhere to go, I mean, even an old person in a nursing home, my grandma, we're not allowed to visit her. Nobody's allowed to come near her. So she's already suffering from dementia, and she's getting no stimulation, and she's just withering away. Her condition has deteriorated incredibly fast, and that's certainly due to some of these effects. So yes, we can say acutely maybe that these lockdowns prevented COVID, but they caused domestic violence. They caused suicides. They're increasingly giving power to a government that nobody trusts. It's amazing that, if you're on the left, you're more inclined to be for more restrictive measures, and yet you'll also say that Donald Trump is awful. And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but then it makes me wonder about giving this position of power, the presidency, the governor, what have you, you're giving them incredible amounts of power, and our legal system is based entirely on precedent. They now have the precedent to shut down your businesses in the name of your safety. They now have the precedent to use tracking, contact tracing, for your safety. And actually, we saw immediately after some of the contact tracing went live, we saw it being used in some Black Lives Matter protests that got ugly. It was in some of these specific Black Lives Matter protests that did have some damage, and they said everyone that went there, even the peaceful protesters, they are now being contact traced because, oh, you were around these people that were doing bad things. So now the government, some powers that be, have you on a list as being affiliated with so-called radical, violent protests, because you're out there exercising your First Amendment right, and there are a lot of good people doing so without violence. And it's a shame that some people have taken over the BLM movement and used violence. But immediately the contact tracing has been used on these groups. It's just our rights are being eroded over and over, and it's really hard to say that the offices we're giving this power to truly always have our best intentions in mind. And if you'll also remember, at the beginning, they were telling us masks don't work at all. Okay. And then now, of course, they've gone back on that. It turns out they knew the truth even back then. They were just lying to keep up supply for the healthcare professionals. But I mean, and now they're acting like we're crazy for not trusting them. Uh, this is an experiment on a mass scale. We've never asked a whole country, 350 million people, stay inside, don't go around anyone. There's all the mental health effects that I've already talked about manifesting as suicides, domestic violence, and of course the economic impacts. This poverty is going to translate into mental health effects and therefore these same things. But there's also, I mean, we don't actually know what happens if you get 350 million people and a year, months, a year or two, ask them to stay away from all germs. Don't shake hands, don't touch anything. I mean, that is how our immune system lives, and we just don't actually know what's going to happen there. Okay, and I mean, it's already hypothesized that in the winter times, one of the reasons we see these spikes in illnesses are that we're all inside and, weakened immune systems. And that's what we've been doing for so long. And then we say, oh, even in addition to all the confirmed COVID cases, even besides those, we have an excess in deaths. They say that aren't listed officially as COVID, but people want to attribute them to COVID and say that's what it has to be. That's obvious what it is because we're seeing more deaths that weren't there before. That's COVID. But why is that the case when we're basically, in a large part, we had simulated these winter conditions where we put everyone inside. You're only chilling, getting your own viruses. Viruses, bacteria, they're mutating all the time. All the time they're changing. And we really should be in constant contact with them in order to keep our immune system healthy and maintained. And there's also the effects of this poor mental health, the will to live, on someone's immune system. If you're run down, depressed, and you're not working, you're feeling like a bum, you haven't seen your loved ones, you have nothing to live for, you're going to get sick more. You just are. So all of these excessive deaths that we can't 100% link to COVID or haven't been, what are causing those? And it could be the lockdown rules. America has always been a country that favored freedom over safety. We wanted to be free before anything else, and by giving the ability to have us all locked down and the ability to trace us all if we've been at a protest for an ideology that they've deemed dangerous, we can create a system in which our descendants can't escape, and we've truly monopolized power up to the highest extent to dystopia. I mean, you look in China right now, Hong Kong, they're fighting their government with bows and arrows because they've also given up their weapons. And we just have to recognize that power corrupts. Absolutely. It absolutely does. Whether or not every person that's going to be in office will be good or bad, there's going to be some good people who do great things. But inevitably, an evil person will come into power. And if you've given that office all the right levers, they can do things that you might have never foreseen. And I just really want to make the case that you're not an evil person for being against lockdown, even against masks. I mean, yeah, look, I'm going to wear a mask. When I see everyone else wearing a mask, I'm not going to be a jerk. You know, if we're all here, you have to go out to the grocery, but you're scared of the corona. I'll wear a mask for your sake, man. I really will. But when they were shutting down businesses and giving these people so much power, you have to understand where now they're asking for different things. We don't trust them. and that's just pretty reasonable. So, take care.